Welcome to Turning Pages podcast. I'm your host, Mel. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to have a multiple best-selling author as my first guest. I have devoured his book, Undefeated, which was exactly what I needed to start the podcast. Scott Allan is an author of multiple best-selling books, including Do the Hard Things First, Undefeated, and Empower Your Thoughts. With his books published in 16 languages and over 500,000 copies sold worldwide, Scott Allan aims to transform human potential and mindset. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to Scott for generously sharing his time and wisdom with us. Our conversation with Scott has been a treasure of insights I can't wait to share. Enjoy today's conversation and stay tuned for more. Thanks. We can get through this. Nice to meet you. What time is it in Japan?
So what, 8 o'clock in the morning?
8 o'clock in the morning. Okay. It's 7 o'clock at night over here.
Yeah, so you're probably Eastern time.
Yeah. So I was finishing up your book, Undefeated. For some reason, that one really caught my eye. Sometimes when you're like in a situation in life and that book just falls onto your vision, it was sort of like that because I was watching you on another podcast talking about procrastination. And for me, I was sort of suffering with that with even starting this podcast and my love for books. And then you spoke a lot about fear in Undefeated. And I really like for me, that really hit home because it's fear. That's something that always just sort of like keeps most people back from doing whatever that's deep in their heart. Yeah,
absolutely.
So I don't know if you want to give us a little bit of background story of how you became like on this journey with your writing and, you know, what got you into this field. Sure thing.
Well, it probably started going way back when. So I've been in Japan for about 25, 26 years. And before I got here, I was going through a period in my life where I had to change a few things or change everything, starting with, my behavior, my mindset, my attitude. Everything was just I wasn't where I wanted to be. And I knew that there was more out there. And then there was more in there. In other words, there was more inside of me. Like I was capable of much more than, I was doing. Yeah, I spent a lot of my youth, like a lot of people, I was, did a lot of partying and drinking, and things were very out of control for a while. And when I decided to give that up, it took quite a while. But once I did, I developed a lot of clarity into what I really wanted in life. And this was a journey. It took a while, but it was really just a combination of deciding that I wanted to get help, finding the right people who could help me, and then tapping into the resources that could push me even further. So, I started to read self-help books and personal development material and started to gather those resources. And I put together a plan, I think I call it a goal system, which I learned from Tony Robbins and other resources. And when I put together my goals, there were a few things on that list. And they were, I think the first thing was I wanted to become an author because that was a dream of mine since I was probably in junior high school. I'm a very active imagination, so I was always making up stories and writing things out, and and of course I still do that, but it was just the one thing that I always felt driven to do. The second thing was I wanted to travel the world. I just thought that'd be really exciting if I could just, leave and go someplace. And I think it's living the hero's journey, which has been, I think that's been the theme for most of my life, really, is, by Joseph Campbell, I think it was The Man with a Thousand Faces, one of my favorite books, so the hero's journey has just been a big part of this. But, all of this tied together, though, it's just been a combination of knowing that I wanted more of life, not just more, I wanted to live a great life. And I wanted to learn and teach that system as well. So I wanted to learn how to do it. I had to train myself to move from a place of, negative behavior, self-defeating habits and all those things. I had to leave that stuff behind and find a way to break away from it so that I could, move into a place where I was more empowered. I want to empower my skill sets, empower my habits, empower my goals, and empower my mindset to build this great life that I had a vision for. So a lot of this really just came down to taking action, figuring out what I wanted, working out the action steps required to get there, and then just showing up every day and working towards that dream. And I still have that same approach to life, I think. Undefeated. So that book came about. I think I probably put that together back like maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but I do remember like I wanted to create a book that just encompassed all of those lessons. And I have several other books that refer to, sometimes the books, they cross-reference each other, of course, but that book was really an important book for me to write, I think. I talked about the goal system, leaning harder into overcoming fear, and we can get into a little bit more of that in a bit. But and the other thing was just identifying what your obstacles are, your roadblocks. What are the things that are in front of you that are blocking you from moving forward? And a lot of times we think that it's something external, and sometimes it is. We have external roadblocks, but then we have the internal roadblocks that are harder to see. It's easy to see a roadblock in front of you, and if it's something physical, maybe you can work around it. But when it's something that's internal, those roadblocks are more difficult to identify, and sometimes we need help. We need other people to point out what those are. So you mentioned procrastination. That's one of those internal roadblocks that I think holds everybody back to a certain degree, because procrastination is, we all procrastinate, put stuff off. That's just human nature. When it becomes a problem, I think, is when procrastination becomes your default for everything. Like when fear shows up, you stop taking action because you want to lean away from the fear and take the path of least resistance, right? And if that becomes your default habit, then you just continue to lean harder into that, and that becomes really a path for failure, I think. So the procrastination is it's a very powerful topic for me, because yeah, it held me back for many years, and it still does. Like to this day, I still have to be aware of it. Like, oh, I'm putting that thing off again. That number one thing that I should be working on. I'm not doing it because, and it's usually because a fear of doing this thing is holding me back. And the solution is rather simple, although the action may be difficult to put into play. But the solution is really just to figure out one small step you can take to move forward. So these are the systems that I put into place, not just for myself, but so I can teach other people how to, and do the same thing. And that way we can all become undefeated. Undefeated is really another metaphor for, like building mental toughness as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just the mental toughness. I think it's a combination of mental, physical, and spiritual as well. I didn't mention the spiritual side of things as much in that book. I think that the book has a lot more potential. So I'm actually developing a course around that and Fail Big. And so I'm going to be possibly relaunching that book as well. Like a newer version of it will be coming out, because there's a lot of great lessons in there that I think I've refined since the book came out. So
Well, that would be great because I mean, I wanted to know too, do you have a spiritual practice that helps you with your goal setting or a certain, like, I know meditation and, certain people have certain things that they do,
mm,
prayer. Some people do yoga. For me, I do
mhm,
kickboxing, right?
mhm.
So, what is your spiritual, aspect of things that help you along the way?
I think the spiritual practices, I mean, sure, I love meditation, doing deep thinking. There's also a Buddhist monastery or temple that is near my home here. In fact, I think it's one of the biggest temples in Japan, where I go there almost every Sunday. And for 1 hour, I sit down with a dozen monks and they meditate. So it's really, really interesting. You walk into this big room. It's quite dark, and it's on early Sunday morning, and we just sit on these cushions and we meditate for an hour or two. So that's part of my spiritual practice for the week, I think. But a lot of the spirituality really just comes down to I think the beliefs I have around this journey, that, I don't know. I mean, if things are happening for a reason, or I don't believe that things just happen. I think that we have to show up every day, and that there's a certain, there's real energy in this world. I mean, we are energy, and energy is around us. And if I can quote Yoda from The Empire Strikes Back, one of my favorite quotes was like, energy surrounds us, combines us. And I really believe that, because it's true. Like if you can figure out how to control your energy, then you can start to control the circumstances around you. You can actually if you're in a, like a room with a crowd, or like a crowded room with a bunch of other people, and you're silent, and even if the room is, I've been in parties before where recently where there's a lot of noise and people talking and everything, and I can be the most quiet person in the room, and I can hear everything going on. And for me, like that spirituality is just being able to tap into my environment. The other part of it comes down to spiritual beliefs as well. Not getting into, not religious so much, but I mean, I think spirituality is just, it's just being comfortable with yourself, and also my beliefs around this is that, if there is a higher power in the universe, then, I feel very lucky or blessed that
Mm.
somehow on this journey it's been helping me out. So there's got to be something at work in this universe, because when I look back at all the things that I went through, I had a lot of lucky breaks, and sometimes I wonder if they were really so lucky after all. But I think though, if your intention is to show up, be a good person, put in the work, you want to, like, I'm here to help other people, right? And the more people that I can help, I can pass that along and they can pay it forward to others. And I think that's the cycle that, all of us can invest in. So
So it's like a being in service. So you're like serving humanity.
that is one way to put it. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I guess I mean, I guess what I was trying to say, most people I know that when well, within this field, then they are in service to others.
Mm,
And by being in service to others too, you do reap the rewards of it.
mm,
And
mm.
of course, with pure intentions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
What else can you tell me? I know the book you have, the with the procrastination, you have the concept of do the hard things first.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah, when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh.
Mm,
I need to like pay a little bit more attention to what I'm doing. When it comes to my work life, like my work, I do the hard things first, but when it comes to my goal setting, I was like, okay, I need to implement that into
mhm,
the things that I'm working on. Is just really just do the hard things first in the morning. Just have a plan.
mm, mm. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I think too, I mean, I was never really, I would say, like, when it came to goal setting, I was very good at writing down goals and going, yes, I want to have that thing, and then creating a set of action steps toward to getting it. But then somewhere along the line, like I would, like, to do that consistently every day, you really have to be intentional. Not just intentional, but you have to be absolutely certain that this is something you want. And you'll know, because you just write something down. I'll give you an example. Maybe, I don't know, my goal is to make $1 million next year, for example, right? Well, that sounds like something that maybe a lot of people might put down as a goal, but unless you really, really want it, and I think it's not just wanting it, you have to have a reason for that as well. So for me, if that were my goal, my reason for wanting that isn't just to have a bunch of money in the bank. I know that sounds really, like something that probably, and don't get me wrong, having money is a good thing. But the question for me is like, well, once I get that goal, then what? Because we think that once I get the goal, that's it. And, I've achieved my mission, so to speak. But really the goal is just a milestone, because once you get it, it's like you're looking for the next thing. You're going for the next, to scale up to the next level. So just getting back to the example, if I do achieve that goal of having $1 million in my bank account, it's like, okay, well, what can I do with this? Like, how can I take this resource that I now have and put it out into the world to generate some goodwill for everybody else? And again, money is just energy. So it's like, now I've got this extra energy. Now what do I do with it? Right. So that's kind of how I look at the goals too. I mean, I've sort of in a different approach to it lately, where I'm going to call them projects. I have a lot of projects on the go, and the projects are just, again, it's the same thing. It's like like project management, every project that I have has got certain pieces built into it. The pieces are just milestones. The milestones all have action steps. And the thing is, you can avoid getting overwhelmed by all of your plans by just having, those specific action steps every day. But then you have to decide, what are the most important projects that you're working on, to the lever movers that are moving you forward, because otherwise, I mean, we can make projects all day and be working on stuff, but, is it really moving you forward, like moving you towards that place where you want to be in 1 year, 5 years, 20 years from now? So I think that's where the level of like creative the visualization comes in. You really have to visualize yourself, in a space in the future, being able to move your emotions into that spot in the future so that you can actually experience the dream before you actually get there. I think that's a big part of my dream building process is being able to put myself in that situation again emotionally so that I can feel what it's going to be like when I get there. That way I'm going to be more compelled to move forward with it. And procrastination will be, it'll still show up, sure, but procrastination is just another form of fear. And fear is just, I guess false evidence appearing real, which which means that, the more that we actually give into it, the more fearful we become, and then we look for an
Mm.
escape, and I've always been, I think one of my defaults has always been to take the easy path. Like I didn't always take the easy path, but I always gravitated towards that. But that was just uh, moving away from the thing that I really wanted onto that path of fear and feeding into the fear because that just felt like that felt familiar to me, right? But because it does take a lot of courage, I think, to move forward with your plans, with your goals. And again, it's not just all about me and getting what I want. It's like if I don't do this thing, there are people out there who are not going to be able to benefit from my hard work, and that's the thing. Like I want to pass everything on. I want to because we're not going to be here forever. But I always think in terms of like say my children may learn something that I teach them. They'll pass it on and they'll pass it on. And people that I work with in workshops and in coaching, like all of these are pathways that are leading to, I think, like as you mentioned, like benefiting mankind and showing up and being of service. So
Two questions I wanted to ask. Well, it came up while you were speaking. One is when we're goal setting or having projects, should we keep to a certain number at a time instead of overwhelming ourselves? Because I know sometimes, like I might listen to like a motivational thing and like they like write down your goals, and then I have like a whole a sheet, you know. What's the best way to like go about that and like sort of put like what we should be focusing on? Like how do we, shuffle
Mm.
the list?
Yeah. Well, I think when it comes down to your goals, like let's just say, we have probably what maybe 6 to 8 areas in our lives that we want to focus on: work, family, uh, exercise, physical exercise, spirituality, which could be meditation, deep breathing, and then travel is one of my goals, Ashley. So I have like 5, 6 areas that I may be focusing on. And so each of those areas could have one project, right? So when it comes to uh, I think my business, there's I mean unlimited amount of projects that I have in there, right? So I don't really have a cap on it. Like I'll come up with an idea for a new book, a new project, a course or something like that, a new product that I want to create. And I don't necessarily have a cap on it. I have a long running list of these things, but where I usually get lost is that I try to do too many of these things at once. And I'm in that situation often actually where I make too many promises, I set too many deadlines, and although I may end up finishing the work, I don't always hit my deadlines because I just probably took on too many things at once, right? And trying to do too much. So I get caught up in, trying to scramble at the last minute, trying to finish that book, trying to, maybe doing too many coaching hours or something like that. So I do have to remind myself to focus on just one thing at a time and finish it and move on to the next thing. That sounds really good in practice, I think. But, if you have a goal or a project that's going to take you several months, obviously you have other things that you will need to be working on. I think what's good is to set yourself up so that you have those long-term projects or goals, but you also have those short-term goals that you can get those small wins, right? We need those small wins along the way so we can feel like we're making progress, right? And so I also have those list of small goals, like things I can do today to get me that small win that's going to move me forward. And again, all those small wins are just moving you towards the bigger picture, I think. So, but yeah, to your question though, I mean, I think it's yeah, sure you can try to limit. Well, to be honest, I don't think anybody should limit themselves to how many goals they have or their dreams or anything. Like in one of Jack Canfield's books, I think it was the law of attraction, maybe. He goes through the goal process in there, and it's great. It's like, write down your goals, how are you going to get to your goals, make an action list. He's got a little it's like a journal actually, and you can write out your goals in the book. And I think the list is like 101 things on the goals list or the dreams list.
Mm.
So I've done that several times actually, and yeah, it's great because I think you need to get everything down on paper out of your head, so that you can see what you've got, and then you can go through the list and prioritize it. Actually, like prioritizing everything is really important. So again, in the prioritization comes with knowing like where you want to be in 1 year or 5 years or 10 years. I do struggle with that where, setting like the 10-year goals or 20-year goals. I don't really go that far out. My goals are probably more like 1 year. I have a vision for like maybe the next 5 years, but my goal setting is really just for the next year, I would say. Just that way it's just easier to compact it into that time frame. But yeah, that's just a really good practice, I think, for anybody. If you can take 15 minutes every night before you go to bed, just do some journaling. It doesn't matter if it's in a notebook or in a journal, or, you can do it on the computer. But I do find though there's something very powerful about pen to paper. And that's why I do a lot
There
of
is.
my journaling is always just, pen to paper, 15 minutes at night. I'll do it in the morning as well. And it just really clears your head, and again, gives you clarity. And clarity is something that I think we should always be striving for, because I was talking to somebody the other day and talking about my computer and how like I have like 80 tabs open and like multiple browsers open. And to me, that's kind of normal, and it may be an ADHD thing, but when I was sharing my screen with somebody, they're like, "Wow, you have a lot of projects on the go or goal," or like they mentioned something. You're working on a lot of things, and those are the kind of things I don't really notice in my space until someone else mentions it. But when they did, I decided like actually maybe that's why I'm so exhausted every day, or not every day, but like maybe that's why my focus is just all over the place. Is every time you look at those tabs, it's actually a reflection of everything that's going on inside your head too, like how we file things, right? Could be a room that needs to be decluttered because it's just, stuff everywhere, like every time our attention goes to one of those like open tabs, it captures our attention. And anything that captures your attention has your focus. And everything that has your focus, it has you basically, right? So that's why we need to direct our focus into just that one thing that we want to work on, complete that thing and move on to the next thing. So
Well, okay. Do you think you're a person who works well? Like you're just probably strive better under pressure, like under with that, 20 tabs open? Because I think there's
mm.
two people where there's one that the minimum is 4 tabs, right? And 2 projects at a time. And then there's, like you, like with 20 tabs open and could have multiple projects going on and you have a deadline and you just get to it.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't believe in multitasking. I've certainly tried to master it. I don't think it's something, I mean, some people are really good at it, but again, I don't think it's healthy. So I try not to do it, or at least I try to be aware of when I am doing it. And yeah, I am working on multiple things at the same time. And it depends who you talk to. Some people do work better that way. I mean, not everybody can do one thing and move on to the next thing. To be honest, I struggle with that a lot. And I love the concept of it. Just do one thing at a time, move on to the next thing. But I'm doing one thing and then I'll get a small win there and then I'll go on to the next thing. And so I have multiple projects that I'm working on throughout the day, and I'll spend half hour, 1 hour, 2 hours on each one. Right. Try not to put in, I don't want to put in a 14, 16-hour day like anymore. I do have some days like that, but I think that, I think you have to just see what works for you, because some people can just focus in on one thing for the entire day and that's great. And the next day they might do a different thing. Ideally, that's actually how I think I do work best that way. But again, with the open tabs and all the things that I'm working on, I think like when it comes to doing the hard things first, you have to prioritize what your tasks are. And that's something that's hard to do, because sometimes the priorities, we look at the priorities and go, okay, like those are the things I know I should be working on, but these things over here, actually, I'm going to enjoy doing these things more. So you're combating the things that are going to be hard to do, the things that you enjoy doing. And I'm not saying that they can't be the same thing, but more often than not, the hard things that we know we should be doing are the hard things that we will be, pushing off as far as we can. Putting together, the receipts for my taxes is a good example. I've had to do that for the last 3 weeks. I've been putting that off, right? to me, it's a hard thing to do. Some people, they can just do it very quickly. And to be honest, it's probably an hour's work. And yet they'll pile up on my desk, and every time I look at it, I feel that anxiety, it's like, oh yeah, there's that big pile of receipts that I was supposed to organize, and I keep promising my accountant I'm going to do it, and I still haven't done it. So there are certain things that obviously I will put off and put off and put off, maybe hoping somebody else will come in and do it, and realizing I'm actually the only one that can do it. So, and I think that's just something to recognize, in your day to day, like what are the things that you are subconsciously avoiding, because those are actually the things that once you get them done, that's how you build confidence too. Like confidence isn't something that, you don't wait for it to show up and then you go and do something. You do something and then you feel great and then you go on and do something else. You just keep building on that. So
Okay. And concerning the fear, do you think that fear becomes stronger as we age? Like, I
it's,
feel like
mhm,
because the risk, sorry there to cut you off there, but the risk of doing something as you get older, I feel like there's a lot of fear
mhm,
that surrounds us for that change to happen.
mhm. For me, it wasn't so much an age thing because fear is always something that we're going to have. Because, so let's just take an example. Imposter syndrome is a form of fear, right? So imposter syndrome is because I work with a lot of people who struggle with that, myself included. And I realize like imposter syndrome, we frame it up as the negative thing, actually. Like I shouldn't have imposter syndrome. I should be able to, like write a book or, you know, get on stage and sing or whatever it is, do public speaking. But imposter syndrome, that form of fear, is there for a reason because you're working towards something that you've never done before or you're fairly new at it, you're going to feel fearful of that thing. So fear is a good thing too. I mean, it's not, I think we frame it up as something that we shouldn't have or we should get rid of it. You'll never be rid of it. I mean, it's just part of our human nature, but instead recognize that when it shows up, there's a reason for it. And for me, it's always because I'm in unfamiliar territory, right? I am in an area of uncertainty, actually. And sure, maybe when we get older, we might have more fear, but it could be like, I think we have different fears though. I remember when I was younger, I had a fear of not making it through school, and so our fears were different. Fears were different back then. Now they might be different fears, but really they all just come down to, I think a lot of it's just the same thing. It's like, well, whatever that thing is that I'm fearing, it's probably because I'm not taking enough action towards that thing. Let's say, for example, I'm fearful of retirement because I don't have enough money. Okay, well, the problem is maybe I don't have enough money. So what the solution is, maybe I need to figure out a way to invest more money to cut. So you can actually, when you start to walk through it, you can start to see that the fear is based on the fact that I haven't paid much attention to that area of my life. That could be one reason. If it's a new challenge you're taking on, I went skydiving back in December and I had a lot of fear around that, but I didn't let the fear stop me from getting on the plane. I didn't have to do it. Nobody forced me to do it. It was just one of those things that I've always wanted to do, but I was always afraid of doing it. I thought, well, how would I feel after do this thing? Like that was the thing, is like fear is always there until you do the thing. And then afterwards, you're like assuming that you make it through. Afterwards, it's like, wow, that was actually, I was terrified of it to begin with. And then after I went through that thing, it felt great, and that's the thing. And then there'll be the next thing that'll, when I try the next new thing, fear will be there again. But that's great. I mean, challenge the fear. And that's just, an example of like, if you're taking on a challenge. But when we have like our daily fears that show up, the fear of, yeah, not having money maybe, or the fear of getting sick and these things, like eventually, yeah, we will all probably get sick at some point, but like, what can I do to prevent that? Like, or to put it off as long as I can? Well, I could probably go to the gym more. I can, do fasting, whatever it takes. So there's always something we can do to, reduce that amount of fear, right? So I think the stronger the fear, the less you're actually doing, right? If you're feeling really fearful, terrified, it's like, okay, that's probably it's at a level that for me, like that's a warning. That's an indicator that I really need to do something, because now that the fear can lead to anxiety, and then that can lead to actually, where like health problems, mental health problems. So I guess the bottom line is like, just you don't have to figure out why the fear is there. You probably know why. You just have to take a look at it and go, okay, I'm feeling fearful. Like I'll go back to the receipts that are piling up on my desk. Like every time I look at it, I feel anxiety. And then I'm like, okay, and I look for another way to avoid it, right? And it's like, you know what? I'm just gonna set my timer for 30 minutes, take those receipts, and I'm gonna start to hack away at it and file them away. Within an hour, I'm done. The fear is gone. I feel great because I just did that thing I've been procrastinating on for 3 weeks. And then you're like, well, that wasn't so hard. So, you know,
Yeah. When I heard about your story, when I was listening to the podcast that you were on and you talked about the skydiving, because you did mention that you were afraid of heights.
mm,
And when I heard that, because I'm afraid of heights myself, and when I heard that, I was like, yep, I'm sorry. Nope. I am not doing that.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, that is like, that for me, that is really conquering a fear of heights.
Yeah, I did the same thing with roller coasters last year. I think it was, I mean, we live near Universal Studios in Japan, and I've been there dozens of times, hundreds maybe, I don't know. But I've never went on the roller coaster or the flying dinosaur, which is a pretty wild ride. I would like looking at it from the ground up is like like not the roller coaster so much, but the flying dinosaurs is really like it goes up to like about 40, 50 meters maybe, and then just does this steep dive. And I used to watch people get on that again. My kids would go on it and they're like, come on, daddy, we can, I'd be like, no, I want, but the thing is though, I wanted to, right? And that's the thing is like, because I'm always challenging things, I think, but that was just, and this, it's a fun ride. I mean, it's not like a life threatening, well, I don't think so anyway. It's not like a life threatening ride. And I'm watching like, I'd watch everybody get off the ride afterwards, like, like these little old ladies were getting off the rides in their 80s and they're going, well, wasn't that great? Let's do it again. And I was like, okay, well, what's my problem? So, eventually I got on the ride one day and just right up until like, yeah, it was scary. Don't get me wrong, but only the first time, right? After that, I went on it again and again and again. And I did the roller coaster, and then after that, it's like, wow, you mean I could have been doing this the whole time? And like this is great. So it's just things like that, right? I mean, I think when I look at it, like, okay. What's the worst that can happen? Obviously, the worst that can happen is that the roller coaster can go flying off the rails, maybe, but I mean, when does that happen? How often has that happened? Never, not there anyway. Right. So, I mean, I think the fear is legitimate, but I mean, but here's the thing too. Like, if you really have a fear of heights, maybe it's a phobia and your doctor's telling you not to do it, well, or you have health problems, obviously, you shouldn't do it. Right. But if that's not the case, and if it's something that you do want to do, so I'm going to go back actually just to a different topic, writing books, like when I started writing again I guess about 15 years ago, I had a fear of actually sitting down and writing again because I hadn't done it for a long time. I thought, what if my writing sucks? I'm no good. Nobody reads my writing. I had all these fears built up even before I was doing it. And then one day I realized, like, well, if I don't actually sit down every day and just do it, it's never going to get done anyway. 20 years is going to go by, and my future self is going to look back and go, well, I wish I'd actually become that writer I always wanted to be. Like, I knew that was going to be the case. And so when I actually projected into the future and I saw myself looking back, having that regret, that was the day I probably sat down and started writing again. And I just did it every day until I finally had a book a few years later. But that's the thing is like, if it's something you really want to do, you're compelled to do it and you're afraid of doing it, the only solution is to sit down and start doing it. And I mean, just sit down every day and start doing it. Like every day is a new day. Every day you have to start this thing every day, right? Because showing up, starting something that might be the hardest thing to do, but you'll be over it in 5 minutes. Once you start to make those small wins, like once I had a page written, then I had a chapter written, then I had another one written. And I started to see after a few months, I could see it taking shape, right? I was like, oh, well, this actually is possible. So, um, yeah, anyway, there's probably a few lessons there to take away.
When you started your writing journey, did you, and got over the fear of writing again, and you wanted to get the book published, did you also have to face the fear of rejection? Or did you prep yourself that knowing that not every publisher was going to take on your
Mm.
book?
Yeah, I wasn't really afraid of rejection at that time. I was more afraid of not finishing the book, actually. So, well, here's the thing. I wasn't really afraid of rejection because I think that I just wanted to write the book and put it out there. I wasn't going to tell anybody about it anyway, right? I was looking for a publisher, and then when Amazon launched their self-publishing platform, I just decided to self-publish it instead. No, again, I just put it out there. And, for me at the time, I still had a full-time job here. So I didn't need writing to pay my bills per se. And at that stage, I was just calling it a hobby. Even after I had published a few books and I was making a little bit of money, when people asked me about it, I would just say, "Oh yeah, I'm still working on my hobby." I didn't want to take it seriously because, just a part of me didn't believe that I could actually make it, even though I was already publishing books. And I don't even think I was calling myself a writer at that stage. I might have been, but I mean, it just didn't feel real. As part of that imposter syndrome was there for a very long time. And I don't know at what stage that it eventually went away. I think it would still be there if I decided to switch gears today, maybe start writing hot romance fiction or something. I'd probably be feeling like an imposter syndrome, imposter again. But yeah, I wrote a couple of books on rejection. Actually, Rejection Reset came out of my fear of rejection, which I had a deep fear of that. It wasn't around my writing getting rejected. It was more like, I think a lot of us, we end up rejecting ourselves before anybody else can reject us. Like going for that job interview. Every time I went for a job interview, like the number one thought going through my head was, what if they don't take me? What if they don't hire me? What if they reject me? And sure, I didn't get every job I went for, like a lot of people, but in the end, it's, like that whole rejection mindset was just something that I realized, well, they're not rejecting you. They just found somebody who is better suited for the job, and you're better suited for another job. So I talk about that a lot in Rejection Reset and Rejection Free, but it's just a mindset really. But just keep that in mind that, the rejection, I think, that we're fearing externally is really an internal fear. Like, I've always rejected myself before I gave anyone else a chance to do it. So
Right. Okay. That's interesting. And it makes a lot of sense, though, that we would be rejecting ourselves. And I think there's a lot of the inner dialogue that we have going on in our
mm,
head that sort of tells us that, we're not going to approach that person or go into the job interview with that mindset of it's possible because you said too, if like you didn't get the job, you probably weren't suitable for it. It wasn't the
mm,
right job for you. But we often do tell ourselves, oh shucks, like, the world's against me. I didn't get the job.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thing too, yeah. Let's say that, and let's just say that it's a job or a profession that I really want to break into, and nobody's hiring me for this. Like, okay, well, they're not hiring me because, oh, they told me I don't have the skill sets for it. Okay, well, what are the skill sets I need, right? If I really want to do this thing, I have to learn the skill sets. If you learn the skill sets, now you're giving yourself leverage, right? And now you have a better chance of getting that job. So it's not about, they're not rejecting you personally. I mean, that's the way it feels, but I mean, they're not rejecting my personality. And maybe they are. Maybe my personality is not a fit for the job. Well, it may be difficult to change my personality. I mean, but I think that the if it's a certain skill set, the thing about skills is that, we can always learn anything we need to get the job done. To whether if you're building an online business, right, you need certain skill sets, and you can also hire people for those skill sets if you don't have them, right? But I mean, so that's the thing too, is like just recognizing that, the reason somebody said no to you could be because, you're lacking something that they needed. And if you really want to get your foot in the door, like figure out what is it that I need to do to get there. For me, again, just back to the publishing world, it's like, sure, I've been rejected by publishers, but then I started asking them, like some of them actually gave me some really good advice on how I could get accepted by a publisher. So I took that information and started to apply it to my process. So
And you started off with Amazon, right?
yeah, like most people, and I still publish, like self-publish to Amazon every month, actually. But the thing is, I have a large international following, I think, where I work with 20 to 25 other publishers internationally in about 16 countries. So whenever I put a
Okay.
book out, I'll self-publish it first, and eventually it'll get picked up by other publishers. And we have a publisher here in Japan as well. They do a couple of books every year. But again, all of this came about, I guess we'll call it, the opportunity came about because the opportunity was built way ahead of time. You have to prepare for opportunity, right? And if you show up and you do the work and you're preparing for the day when you have that opportunity or you get that lucky break, then you're ready for it. So
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. That falls in line with mastery as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think mastery is just, that's just a form of excellence. And excellence is just a form of, for me, part of that is integrity. Like just, I'm going to do what I said I was going to do and I'm going to get it done. And it may not be perfect, but, if somebody asked me for something and I said I'm going to do it, I will do it. Um, and that's just, I don't know, that's just the way I roll. And I think that's part of mastery. Mastery makes up there's a lot that goes into that, I think. But I think mastery for the most part is just, there's a certain mindset that goes into that as well. Because in order for you to master something, you have to work hard at it and you have to put in those 10,000 hours, right? So, I mean, we can't master everything. So you have to be very, I think, diligent and decisive into like, what is it that you want to master, because that, if you're going to build, if you're going to invest in this thing, make sure it's the thing you want. Make sure the ladder is leaning against the right side of the building when you climb it. And not always it is. I mean, sometimes we end up, I shouldn't say we walk down the wrong path. I don't think that's the case, but sometimes we may start working on something or moving down a certain path and realizing, well, this actually isn't what I want. Maybe I started doing this, like, could be, maybe you got into a certain profession because your parents wanted you to, or your education was just pushing you into that. But I have a friend of mine who became a doctor when inside he actually wanted to become a musician. And when he realized that, he quit being a doctor and he became a musician. His parents weren't happy about it, but he was happy. So, but that's just the thing. Like, you just have to recognize, what are the things you're feeling most, not really passionate. I don't like to use the word passionate. I think that's kind of like motivation that can kind of come and go, but it's a compelling drive that you have deep within you, that something says like, this is what you're meant to do. And once you know that, then you can turn that into, that becomes fuel for your fire. Like, now you're showing up every day without question. You're just working on your thing. I mean, and we may deviate, we may get distracted, but I mean, that's just all part of the course as well. It's like, it just like the ship that has to, you have to. I did a lot of sailing back in the day, and like, no matter how hard I tried to keep the boat on, keep it going towards the target, keep it going straight, it always veered off a few degrees. So that was like, we always had to be checking the compass and everything. And I think life's just like very similar to that. So.
Yeah. I know you read a lot of Stephen King when you were younger,
Mm,
and reading fiction has helped your writing. I
mm,
was actually really happy that you had mentioned that, because sometimes when you're in the self-help development industry, you don't hear much about fiction
mm,
and
mm,
the power it does have behind, whether it's storytelling or the characters itself
mhm,
that are in the fiction book.
mm.
So how did like the fiction books help you within your process? Do you still read them from time to time, or is it for inspiration?
I don't read them as much as I used to, but I love fiction, and I wrote a lot of fiction, and I will be publishing my fiction book soon. In fact, I started out as a fiction author because I had a very, and I still do, very active imagination, always coming up with stories. And growing up with Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, and it's just like all of that, I was just surrounded by so much inspiration, I think. But yeah, growing up with, like, I'd be 10 years old and I was reading Pet Cemetery and Christine and just like a lot of Stephen King books. But then wasn't just reading these books. I started coming up with my own stories and I started writing out my own stories. And I just love that. Like, I knew, I think when I was like 11 or 12 years old, like, I was going to eventually become a writer. And sure, I did actually write a book when I was like 13, 14 years old. I spent like a year just handwriting this science fiction book. So even back then I was talking about, becoming a writer and publishing books. And eventually I had stopped doing that, took about a 20-year break actually, but got into other things, other professions, eventually became an electrical engineer. But I knew in my heart that that wasn't what I was meant to do. I just, it was a good job for sure. And it was part of the journey, but there was always that calling to, be that writer. So, but yeah, just going back to the fiction though, it's like, I still read fiction. Occasionally I still write fiction. And the thing with the nonfiction journey, like with the self-help journey, is like, the reason I decided to go from fiction to writing self-help books is because I'd always had both, but like, I always had a combination of fiction and nonfiction books on my bookshelf. Like, nonfiction isn't self-help, personal development books. And I just had to make a decision. I think, like, which path do I want to take? I mean, because I can't do both. Like, I mean, maybe now I can, but back then it was like I needed to choose a path and just go with it. And something just said, I'm gonna, you got to put together this self-help book that I had in my mind for a long time. So I did, and I kept all my fiction stuff. I've still got those books, and I'm going to publish them. And the thing is, I wasn't really expecting the self-help books to take off, and they did. And now that they now that they have, I don't think I can, not that I want to stop doing them, but because now I'm out there, I'm doing workshops and teaching the material and everything. um, but and I think I'll continue to write and publish them. But over here is this other part of me wants to do that, that series that I created about that action hero, like the kind of like the Jack Reacher type, or Stephen Hunter, one of my favorite fiction authors. He writes about snipers and things like that, and I was always been like interested, like just love stories like that. So anyway, for me, it's kept my imagination alive. And, I'm the kind of like when I was a kid and I think I watched Indiana Jones way back and when it came out in 1981. And I remember going home that day and trying to make a bullwhip out of a piece of rope, like I would just do things like that. So
What genre is your book going to be in?
the fiction,
Yeah.
probably military thrillers. Yeah. Military thrillers or action thrillers. Yeah. So I also read a lot of like Tom Clancy, love Tom Clancy, Dale Brown. Now, I was never in the military, so a lot of the material requires a lot of research. I did write a book though it was a submarine thriller actually based in World War II, and I did a lot of research on submarines. And I went to Pearl Harbor and actually toured a World War II submarine that was docked in at the base at the time. And I remember though just having all these books on submarines, and I'd never, I'm not a submariner, of course. I'd never been on a submarine up to that point, but I was just fascinated by it. I used to love watching submarine movies and reading. I had dozens of fiction books about it. So really, and the thing is, when I read the books too, I'm not just reading it, I'm actually reading it for almost like I almost made it like a case study. I'm reading the dialogue and how the author describes a certain scene and everything. So I would highlight things, and I still do that to a certain extent. So, because as an author, I think, as Stephen King said, you're either writing or you're reading, and if you're not writing, you should be reading. That was his approach to it anyway. And I do believe that. I think nowadays I don't read books as much as I probably listen to the audiobooks, but I certainly think I still block off 30 minutes a day to read. And for me though, the reading is more intentional. Like if I'm reading something, it could be because I'm learning a specific skill, or, right now I'm reading a book called, I think it's I Will Teach You to Be Rich, because I'm learning more about finance and things like that. But then for fiction, I may choose a fiction novel because that's in the future I may be wanting to put together a book like that. So yeah. So my
Yeah.
reading is somewhat, I think, there's just so much material out there that, especially if you're a writer, you may be reading something because it's going to be helping your writing as well.
Yeah, I do find fiction books do, I think they help spark a creativity aspect,
Mm,
whereas you can get motivation and inspiration from the self-help books, but there is a
mm,
certain creativity that, I don't know, for me personally, it just sort of comes out when I do read
hmm
fiction book. It's almost like a reset.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Have you ever read The Artist Way?
Oh yeah, I have that. Yeah, with Julie Cameron. Sure. Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
That's where I got the idea of the doing your 3 days a day, or your 3 pages.
Three.
If people want to find out more about me, they can they can visit scottallanbooks.com or scottallanpublishing.com. Scottallanbooks.com is where we have the Shopify store set up. We're selling the books directly there.
Mhm.
Uh, and of course, they can always go to Amazon. But if they go to our storefront, they can buy everything in bundle sets. Actually, and get everything like cheaper. They can buy like you know 12 books at once with the audiobooks, paperbacks, Kindle as well. So,
Okay, I'll put all the description on the link when I upload the video. And thank you for your time.
all right. Well, thank you. It's been a great conversation.